You want to start, Megan? You're all ready?
Yeah, I'll stand up there and do it over here.
I'm quite sure. And do it better than me.
No.
So a few things at the top here. I think you know today the department issued an updated policy on prohibited extremist activities by military personnel. This is instruction 1325.06, which is an existing instruction that we updated, and we updated it as a result of, as I think you know, when Secretary Austin back in the spring established the counter-extremism working group. That was one of the immediate actions that he wanted them to take. So that has been updated and published, and it goes into effect today. The revised instruction regroups issues into 3 sections: prohibited extremist activities, command authority and responsibilities, and criminal gangs. It also prohibits active participation in extremist activities and clearly defines what we mean by the term extremist activities. As Secretary Austin has emphasized, the department is focused on prohibited activity, not on a particular ideology, thought, or political orientation. The department has always maintained a distinction between thoughts and actions. The new definition preserves a service member's right of expression to the extent possible, while also balancing the need for good order and discipline to affect military combat and unit readiness. These new updates provide increased clarity for service members and commanders on what qualifies as prohibited extremist activities. The Secretary heard from personnel across the force about the need to update and clarify this policy during the stand-downs that he directed earlier this year. That was one of the common bits of feedback that we got, was that they wanted more clarity, and so we tried to do that with this new instruction. He signed out next steps that we're also going to be releasing today, along with the Countering Extremism Activity Working Group's report, which should be online and available to you now. The report recommends next steps in 4 lines of effort: military justice and policy, investigative and screening processes, training and education, and the department's insider threat program. The vast majority of men and women in our armed forces, as of course you know, serve honorably. While extremist activity in the force is rare, any instance can have an outsized effect. Now, in addition to revising the instruction, the 3 other immediate actions are also complete. The service member transition checklist has been updated to help address extremist groups that target military veterans. The recruit screening questionnaire has now been updated and is more consistent now across the services, and the department has commissioned a study to gain greater fidelity on extremist activity in the force going forward. That study has begun, and I don't have an update for you on it today. The 6 additional recommendations from the working group are nested inside our government-wide national strategy for countering domestic extremism that was issued by the White House in June. So that's it on the extremist activities. Earlier today, on a schedule item, the Secretary swore in Admiral Chris Grady as the 12th Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The Vice Chairman is assigned a number of responsibilities within the department, including leading the Joint Requirements Oversight Council and as a senior member of the Nuclear Weapons Council. We thank Admiral Grady for his leadership, and we certainly welcome him into his new position here. Lastly, today, we want to wish a happy birthday to the U.S. Space Force. This is year 2 of the service, and year 2 saw tremendous growth in partnerships and significant accomplishments for their mission of organizing, training, and equipping Guardians to serve as the experts in the space domain. The Space Force also commemorates its birthday with a month-long STEM to Space campaign to connect students with space professionals to share experiences and emphasize the importance of STEM education. The campaign is designed to facilitate direct engagement with school classrooms to raise awareness about the service's contributions to national security and daily life, in addition to highlighting the importance of STEM education. This month, they've reached more than 184,000 students in all 50 states: Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, Mexico, Guam, Japan, South Korea, Germany, Belgium, Italy, and the United Kingdom. And so we're, again, happy to congratulate them on their 2nd birthday. Lita.
John, a couple things on timing, and then one other question. Do you know, can you say right now that the checklist for people who are retiring is actually being used as of today? Is the screening of the recruits, is that new updated screening being used as of today? And then the new training and education piece, that didn't seem to have already started to happen, or has some of that actually begun? And then I have a separate question.
The questionnaire has been standardized across the services, and that is in effect. As I said, that he ordered 4 immediate actions, and all of them have taken place. The other one you mentioned was the checklist for departing members as they get through transition. My understanding is that too is in place. And then you had another question on training and education.
Has the additional training, then they talked about sort of a computer training, I mean,
Yeah, I think that's, I'm going to take your question, but I'm pretty sure that's still in train, that we're still working through that. I don't know that it is, fully complete and instituted across the force, but let me ask. I would also just add there that that's the kind of thing that will be iterative, Lita. I mean, it'll be updated and reviewed all the time. So there'll be, I would suspect, continuous changes to that training.
Then, just more broadly on the whole membership in an extremist organization issue, there was a lot of talk about what constitutes active participation.
Mm-hmm.
There's no list of member organizations that people should not be a member of. Can you just explain more broadly, why was there a choice not to at least enumerate some list to give people better guidance? And how limited is this sort of active participation in membership? Like where is the line? What can they do? Can they just say, fill out a little thing that says I am now a member? Do they have to pay dues? Do they have to go to a rally?
Yeah, so there's a lot there.
Yeah,
Just where do I dig in? I mean, so on the groups, and we've talked about this before, a couple of things to remember. Groups can and do change their methodology, their ideals, their motivations, and they can reform themselves. They can disband and reform into something else. And so if we got into coming up with a list of extremist groups, it would be only probably as good as the day we published it, because these groups change. Number two, not everybody who participates in extremist activities is a card-carrying member of a group. Some people just get self-radicalized. And there's many different factors that lead to them taking part in prohibited extremist activities. And so again, keeping it to a group dynamic would actually limit our ability to deal with the issue. The last thing I'd say is there's no federal list of extremist groups, and so we didn't think it was appropriate for the Department of Defense to establish one. On your question about active participation, I mean, and I won't read the whole thing, but it's pretty clear in here, in the instruction, what if I can find it.
This is active participation as it relates to being a member of a group.
Yeah. So active participation, well, let me put it this way, without going through all the list of it. The two-part test of an activity being prohibited, and that's not enough, then you have to be able to prove active participation in that. When you put that two-part test together, and when you go through the list that we have in the instruction, you'll see that there's not a whole lot about membership in a group that you're going to be able to get away with just by dint of the very comprehensive two-part test that's in here and the active participation criteria. There's really not a lot that if you want to be a member of You Pick It, in order to prove your membership, you're probably going to run afoul of one of these criteria sets. Okay, Jen.
So, John, I'd like to understand a little more about if you like content on the internet and how that could get you in trouble in terms of these new rules. what does it mean if someone accidentally likes something, and do they have a chance to explain that to a superior officer? Is it one strike and you're out? And how do you, explain, if you could explain
Yeah,
that.
sure. So the physical act of liking is, of course, advocating, right? And advocating for extremist groups, certainly, groups that advocate violating the oath of the Constitution, overthrow of the government, terrorist activities. Liking is an advocation, and that's laid out clear in the instruction. But the other thing that's laid out in the instruction, Jen, is the responsibilities and the authorities of commanders here. And so it's going to be very case specific. And it will be up to an individual's chain of command and his or her senior leadership in the unit to have that discussion, the determination whether this was a very deliberate act of active participation in extremist activities, or whether it was maybe a mistake. And I don't think it would be helpful to get into hypotheticals at this point in time, but that's one of the reasons. Your question is exactly one of the reasons why one key component of this instruction is a more clear explanation of what commanders' authorities and responsibilities are, and really delegating down to them, because they know their units and they know their people better than anybody. Delegating down to them to help make that determination.
But does that mean that they are authorized to, will they be monitoring social media 24/7 of their unit members or any recruits?
No.
I mean, how does the monitoring?
There's no monitoring. It's not about monitoring. There's no methodology in here. There's no intent. There's no ability for the Department of Defense to monitor the personal social media content of every member of the armed forces. And even if there was, that's not the intent here. What we're talking about is a case where, for instance, it came to light that an individual on social media openly advocated, forwarded, encouraged the dissemination of prohibited extremist material. That would have to come to light through various streams of reporting. It wouldn't be something that the command or the department's going to be actively fishing for.
So if a member of the U.S. military likes a post that says that Joe Biden is not the president, is that considered extremist behavior and punishable?
Now, I'm not going to get into specific hypotheticals, Jen. I just won't do that.
People need to know, is that extremist behavior?
But Jen, we could be here for hours going through whether liking all kinds of different hypothetical pieces of material, and I just don't think that's useful. The instruction's very clear about what comprises extremist activity and what comprises active participation in it, and we are certainly, have full confidence in our commander's ability when something's reported to them to treat it appropriately and to look into it in the manner that they seem fit. I do want, your question didn't get to this, but I'm going to take the opportunity. Nothing about this has anything to do with who a service member votes for or doesn't vote for, or their personal political views. We encourage the men and women of the military to vote. And there are lists separately in a different instruction of what you can or can't do from a political perspective when you're in uniform. But we want them to be a part of the democratic process. That's why we make sure they have access to cast their votes, whether it's remotely or in person. This isn't about political leanings or partisan inclinations. It's about activity. It's about prohibited extremist activity and active participation in that activity.
So, but just to follow up, saying if you like something that suggests that your commander-in-chief is not actually the president, that is different than political activity. That is actually a good order and discipline issue. Is that punishable under these new regulations?
I think, again, I'm not going to get into a specific hypothetical, Jen. It's all in here. But if you are advocating for the overthrow of the government, if you're advocating for the use of violence or force against an individual or group based on who that individual is or that group is. I mean, it's all in here. If you're advocating for domestic terrorism, if you're advocating for, as I said, the overthrow of the government, or you're actively undermining the oath you took to the Constitution to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, then all that fits.
And just the last question is, how many extremists did you actually find?
Well, the effort, just to be clear, wasn't about going and finding extremists. There was two components here. One was to report out the work of the Extremist Working Group, which we've done today, and also updating the instruction, which we've also done today. Now, one of the things that we knew, and we've talked about this many times, was that we needed to get a better sense of data collection, because oftentimes, sometimes you find out about extremist activity from the chain of command reporting it up, or a colleague reporting it. Sometimes we don't know about an extremist activity unless law enforcement or even the FBI reports something to us. So we took a look at both internal and external data systems, and we recognized that we've got to do a better job stitching them together. And you'll see some of that in the working group's report, and we're going to do that. So this exercise wasn't about finding numbers. That said, as we worked through things over the course of the last 8-9 months, we believe that less than 100, or about 100, active duty or reserve component members of the military participated in some prohibited extremist activities, about 100 that we have been able to get together. And but again, our data collection systems still need to get better. And so, that's what we know right now. And we obviously want to be able to make sure that we can refine that going forward, but about 100.